Self high five. Self high five.
Think they got the answers, I change the questions. Good call.
What is up, guys? This is DDP back to talk a little bit of Mavericks basketball with you here. We are doing the rare, more or less, pre-game show here ahead of the Mavericks hosting the New York Knicks. Yes, that means this is the Kristaps Porzingis revenge game. We are finally at this point here, and now this is going to be interesting because it's been a long time since Kristaps Porzingis. We know he's obviously played in these last 7 games, but it's been a long time since he shared the court with a lot of these guys. And while we won't get Dennis Smith Jr., it sounds like he had a death in the family. I believe it was his stepmother that passed unexpectedly in the past few days. He will not be playing, although he is with the Knicks. He did rejoin the team here in Dallas, I believe, yesterday, but it sounds like he won't be playing. So we won't get that storyline. We won't really get a chance to see how the AAC responds to him. I would have liked to have seen how the crowd reacted in that regard. But all the same, we will at least get Kristaps Porzingis against the New York Knicks for the first time. Now, the Knicks aren't a very good team per se. They have 1 win to date for the season, so not a whole lot there that necessarily scares you. But all the same, if you remember what was rock bottom for the Mavericks in the start of last season, it was actually the game I was at against, go figure, a depleted New York Knicks team. Now, with Tim Hardaway Jr. and guys like that, the Knicks came into the AAC last year and pretty much whooped the Mavericks' butts in that game. And yeah, that was the infamous supposed freeze out, Luka Doncic freeze out by some of the Mavs veterans, most notably DeAndre Jordan, boxing Luka out, basically shoving him away from rebounds so he could get him. The offense, the veterans not going to Luka in that case. So that's what I consider kind of rock bottom last season before the Mavericks started to kind of shift the paradigm more in the direction of Luka running things, and you just saw that sink in and set in more and more as the season wore on, until finally it seemed to kind of get through everybody's head that, yeah, this is Luka's team. And then, hey, you go a step further and you trade for the 5 starters to rebuild the team to get Kristaps Porzingis, Luka's running mate for the foreseeable future. And now here we are. The Mavericks in the course of 15 months have completely reversed the script on where they were and where they were headed. And now you have 2 bona fide stars, one that looks like he can be an absolute superstar at your disposal. That is really, really encouraging. But this is more than anything about those same Knicks and Kristaps Porzingis. He's been a little bit off in the last few weeks, or excuse me, the last few games. The Denver game. I always flip those two for some reason. They seem similar for whatever reason to me. The Denver game was a rough game for him. Now, he's still found ways to contribute in other ways. He's rebounded rather well recently. He's had games where he's blocked a lot of shots as well. That's great. But that field goal percentage hasn't necessarily been strong, and the output production hasn't been great either in several of these games. So I want to see that move in the right direction. That said, through 7 games, he's averaging 19 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 assists. Now, what's more, you also have, let me see, block shots. He was averaging 2.7, but then he put up a goose egg this last game. So he's blocking still 2.3 shots per game for the Mavericks. So he's really doing well in that regard. And that's really big for Dallas. They need rim protectors. And even though he hasn't been super consistent at that every game, he has done well for the most part. And that's really helped shape the 5-2 Mavericks, which are decidedly better than the 4-3 Rockets or whatever they are, as they can't seem to beat anybody in the Eastern Conference. Eastside Herald. Now, here's something of note here with the Knicks. The Knicks are currently ranked. This is from Nick Angstad on Twitter. 29th in offensive rating for the Knicks, 100.1 points per 100 possessions. Again, until this last game, Dallas was number 1 in the NBA in points per 100 possessions at 113. The Knicks in defensive rating are 24th at 110.7 points per 100 possessions. Not very good. Add to that them being 1-7 on the year, with their only win coming against the Bulls. And let's look at some of their other losses here. By 20 to Detroit. By 21 to Sacramento. By 12 to Orlando. By 23 to Boston. 2 to Boston. 4 to Brooklyn. And 9 to San Antonio. So while they are trending in the better direction, they've certainly had some really, really bad performances here. So this is something that they're going to have to assess moving into the future for them. But this is a chance for Dallas to continue to build on its momentum that we talked about before. 5-2. Now, some people say you can make an argument for Dallas like, oh, this is how close they were, this close to being undefeated at this point. I understand that sentiment, but it also kind of cuts the other direction, whereas you could say, hey, if not for a coach's review that costs you potentially the Portland game, and then if not for the missed offensive foul against the Lakers, you could have 2 more wins. True, but consider this. In the Magic game, I talked about it in the post-game show, but I did not necessarily outline in detail the specifics of that. In the final 2 minutes of that game, we were in a 1-point game. Dallas went 0-4 from the field, committed 2 turnovers, and missed 2 free throws. And they still got away with a win. So as much as you want to hold up those other games and say, hey, we could legitimately be undefeated right now, you could also hold up that one and say, yeah, but you very easily could have and perhaps should have, because of bad execution at the end, lost this game. Obviously, they didn't, so it's kind of like balancing out a little bit. Things tend to break even. You got 2 games where it kind of screwed you over a little bit, and now you got one that broke your way, even though it wasn't any kind of call or missed call, but rather just a fortunate bounce, even then a fortuitous opportunity. The fact that Orlando settled for Vucevic taking a top-of-the-key three-pointer with their last possession despite having 6 seconds to do something, they're the worst three-point shooting team in the NBA. So the fact that they settled for a three-pointer from their center is rather telling, I think. But it is what it is. Vucevic isn't a terrible three-point shooter. My point is just that it's a strange shot selection in that case when he's been doing work in the low post and mid-range and all that. But even still, we are going here. The Mavericks are sitting in pretty good position here. KP for the season, his field goal percentage hasn't been great, but it's not been terrible. I mean, you look at it, his field goal percentage is 48%. That's his effective, his effective field goal percentage is 48%. His field goal percentage overall is 44.3%. His three-point percentage is still sitting pretty well as well at 36%. Now, that's actually a tick above his career average. It's 36.4% for this season. His career average is 36.1%. So KP, he's had rough stretches, and the one huge issue I've noticed with him this year, he has had an issue getting stripped in the low post. He's got to work on that game a little bit. That would actually be a great thing to bring in Dirk to be a consultant with him on, because Dirk was very good in the low post, even though his game was more built around jump shots than necessarily banging bodies in the post and getting at the rim. KP has that same frame and ability, that same touch on his shot that he should work to implement that a little bit. But even in the turnover department, KP is averaging 2.3 on the year compared to 1.8% for his career. So we saw the really egregious examples of it at the end of the Lakers game. We saw, obviously, what Jonathan Isaac did, just completely wrecking shop against KP in that regard. I think he had 4 steals on the game and 6 block shots, not all of KP, I'm just saying. Jonathan Isaac was a monster in that game, and I think it made it look worse in that regard. But KP, it's the fact that people, first of all, are wanting to write him off at all after 7 games is kind of ridiculous, because the guy missed 20 months of action. And yeah, he started hot. Don't forget the Portland game, he dropped like 34 points or whatever it was. At least 32. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but he had a good game there. And it wasn't until game 3 or 4, after you build a little bit of that wear on you, that he's had some issues. And he's actually shown himself to be quite self-aware. He talked with, the video I saw came from Fanatics View on YouTube, in which he was talking after this last game, pretty much talking very self-aware, basically saying, hey, I've got to get better. I've got to work through this. I'm very aware of it, but I don't want to make it easy on myself. I don't want to give myself slack. I'm basically my own harshest critic. I don't want to give myself room and say, oh, well, it's okay if I'm struggling right now because I missed so much time. I hold myself to a high standard, and I want to live up to that standard even when it's not easy. Even better when it's not easy, because then I know when I do overcome these early struggles and get back to where I want to be. And that's just a matter of the conditioning, the lift in his legs, the touch on the shot, all of that. It's not like you're asking him to make crazy plays that are outside of his boundaries or anything like that. Pretty much saying, when I get there, I'll know I'll be better off for having gone through these struggles, and that he is getting back into that basketball shape and everything like that. I like the perspective a lot in that regard. It seems very self-aware. And as he points out in that clip, he even says, we're 5-2 right now, and I feel like I haven't put together a good game yet. So something to consider there. Spencer Ruiz, is the audio off for anyone else, or is it just me? I don't know. If the audio seems weird to you guys in the comments, let me know, because I don't see any setup issue on my end. So, all the same with KP. Let me scale that back a little bit. All the same with KP. He's in a good spot. Obviously, he wants to beat his old team. He acknowledged that. But it's not really like he's thinking about the Knicks anymore. He's not thinking about the previous era of his career. He does acknowledge, I asked for the trade and everything, but until the last few weeks before the trade, he actually was committed to staying with the Knicks. So we don't know exactly what happened in that period, the last few weeks of his relationship with the Knicks last year, but somewhere in the midst of all that, things pretty much fell into a state of either disrepair or whatever, where the Knicks management didn't seem like they were committed to giving him the max. They wanted to wager their assets on trying to get KD and Kyrie Irving there, only to hilariously clear audio good with you. Okay, sweet. Only to then hilariously dish him out in that case for nothing, because Dennis Smith Jr., I love Dennis, but he is mightily struggling there. He looks like he's regressed. and he's barely getting any minutes at all with New York. I feel bad for the kid because I think he could be good. You just got to have him in the right place and with the right instructional coach to work with him and help him develop. I'm not even necessarily saying that was Dallas, especially once the window of opportunity and rebuild for us shifted once Luka came in. But the Knicks are not where he needs to be, and so they're wasting that. I hate that for Dennis. But obviously, Wesley Matthews, they bought out before the end of last year. DeAndre Jordan left in free agency. They still got those 2 draft picks they're sitting on from the Mavericks, but if the Mavericks can be a good team or a team that is able to certainly make the playoffs, then the Knicks aren't getting good picks there. They're not getting primo picks. So the Knicks have pretty much, across the board, lost the Porzingis trade in every way they could. And so as a result, KP's here long term. The Knicks walked away with pretty much nothing. Pretty much walked away with nothing in that regard. And yeah, I think that's pretty indicative of that. You have a lot of Knicks fans who are still trying to paint it as if, well, KP's a cancer, so it's not going to matter. Things have been frustrating for KP here. He says a lot of that frustration is with himself, directed at himself for how he has played up to date because, yeah, he's missing a lot of spot-up opportunities, stuff that with his feel improving, he'll improve on that. And I'm not worried about it because KP, if you're saying he's playing like garbage, yet his field goal percentages are 44% and 36%, while scoring 19 points a game, averaging 9 rebounds, and over 2 blocks a game, if you're going to give me that and say, yeah, he's not playing very well, and he can get 10 or 15% better based on once he gets into the flow of things, you do realize that would put him somewhere in the neighborhood of like 26 and a half points and like 11 rebounds or something like that, right? Like, I don't know necessarily that the rebound numbers would tick up because I think he has done a very solid job there. Which, by the way, to everyone who after the first 2 games told me I was insane to expect him to be able to block shots and rebound, he's pretty much done exactly that. He's had a couple games where he didn't get any blocks, but he's pretty much done exactly that since the first 2 games. Rebounded well and still had games where he had 5 blocks, 6 blocks, 4 blocks. He's getting his. So that's something to keep in mind there. But if you're telling me he can get better with his touch, and even when we have people saying he's playing like garbage right now, he's still putting up that kind of stat line, you got to keep in mind, once he rounds into shape at that point, then you're talking legit all-star again. Like, if you're that close to it, then we're great. The thing is, in crunch time, he's struggled this year. Part of that could just be the conditioning from the game that needs to improve. Part of that could be confidence and general feel for it. He was bad, as I said, at the end of the Lakers game. He's had moments there. Against the Cavs, he was actually really strong in the fourth quarter and kind of put that away. So I'm not worried about it. I think KP will find his stride. I know some people are very decisive on all of that. And think that we need to do something about it or that it was already a mistake. You got to keep in mind, it was a 5-year deal. I'm not saying he sees the entire 5 years here if things aren't great, but if he's playing as he is right now, yeah, he's going to see the end of that deal. You can't make any kind of jump snap decisions based on the first few games of the season. Like, the Mavericks have started very well. I said if they got through their first 10 games at 5-5, that I would be content given what they were through the first 10 games the past 3 years. So the fact that we're 5-2 already, with now the Knicks and the Grizzlies coming up and a couple other winnable games as well in the next couple after that, yeah, I'm feeling really damn good right now about this team and where I feel they are. They just need to improve. Yes, the defense is still a problem. They're 19th in defense. Actually, that's what they were before the Orlando game. I got to see where they are now. But defense, they need to improve there, particularly interior defense. They're giving up a lot of points in the paint, 58 the other night to Orlando. They have to improve on that front, pure and simple. And clutch free throw shooting has been suspect. Turnover is a little iffy. I think Luka takes, in the last couple games, it seems like he takes a little bit of time to really settle in. And so you'll see a fair number of turnovers from him, whether it's 5 or 6, but he'll get like 3 or 4 of those in the first quarter and a half. And then it's like he settles in and plays much better in the crunch time. So that's all just a product of itself. Luka still knows how to turn it on and close out the deal. Luka's playing like an MVP caliber guy right now. He's not getting a whole lot of national attention in that regard, but Luka's averaging something crazy like, let me see here. I posted it the other day. 26.7 points. This was before the Magic game too, so it's tweaked slightly. 26.7 points, 9.9 boards, 9.1 assists, 1.3 steals, 46% field goals, basically 33% from 3, 81% from the line. Yeah, Luka's playing out of his mind. I don't know if he'll average a triple-double, but as long as he does it in the natural flow of things and it doesn't just become the mission of the season is him hunting the triple-doubles. No disrespect to Russell Westbrook, who was the second and last one to accomplish that to date, averaging a triple-double for the year. But the year Russell Westbrook got 42 triple-doubles, it was very, very clear, that wasn't a good OKC team. And so the entire story of the season, even before the All-Star break, was basically him chasing that record. And you saw that every night where that was the mission. Now, most of the time, his production naturally got him there alone, but there were definitely times where it was very close. And in the final minute and a half, he's hunting those rebounds extra hard or trying to get the assist. Like it instead of winning games and just trying to get a better playoff seeding, it seemed like the primary focus shifted to that. I don't want that for Luka. I don't want that for Dallas. The focus to me is on getting back to the playoffs. Accolades like that, they're nice. They look good on a plaque or something like that, but I'm not worried about it. The only thing that would be cool about that, other than like, oh, that's a cool footnote in his career, that's a very rare thing to do, would be the fact that if he did accomplish that, surely he's getting the MVP trophy at that point. That, at that point, would then make it a little bit more worthwhile to me, but I'm still mostly, kind of like Luka has said himself, my primary focus is the team as a whole. I want the team in the playoffs more than I just want Luka getting the MVP in that case, if he gets to that point. So put some respect on Russell Westbrook now that he's in Houston. All right, well, you guys still can't beat anyone in the Eastern Conference, so do what you want, but keep in mind, I've been watching Russell Westbrook a hell of a lot longer than you have, so I know the good and the bad that comes with Russ, and you've already seen that. He already had like a minus 46 plus-minus rating the other night, so I know he bounced back well, but the point is he will have games where you want to tear your hair out. But it is what it is. Steven Swaim says, knock on wood, talking about Luka's potential career milestones in that regard. I'm with you there. I'll humor you. Knock on wood. Feel like KP is playing at 65% of his capability at the moment, which is pretty cool, yet he's very critical of himself, so I'm very optimistic. I don't think that he's playing down at 65%. I would say he's probably playing around 75-80%. You see it in flashes. It's just the last few games. He hasn't looked especially comfortable, and as Rick Carlisle's quote says on the board behind me, he's acknowledging, I've got to do a better job of getting him easier shots. That's basically what it boils down to. And that was what I wrote about the other week. Not saying you have to manufacture the offense to feed through him, but to rather try and get him going early in games, because he's been at his most productive in his career, and as we've seen in his brief Mavericks career thus far, when you get him going early, that usually pans out well. I know the Lakers game, he got 8 quick points and then fell pretty deathly silent, but for the most part, you get him going early, and you're going to be in good shape. And that's what I think they need to do. They need to manufacture some really good looks for him in his sweet spots as the first few minutes unroll before he goes to the bench for the first time. And you just got to be cognizant of when he comes back into the game. Don't wait so long to get him the ball. I think it was the Cleveland game. He didn't take his second shot attempt of the game until like the 8:41 mark of the second quarter. That's way too long to wait for him to get him integrated into the offense. Like, he's your number 2 guy. You need to treat him as such. Like, the offense, Luka, I get it. He's the maestro. He's going to look to make the right basketball play most of the time. Every now and then, he'll look more for his shot and try and take over the game himself. I get that. That's great. But you do need to keep in mind the whole thing that makes having the unicorn special and rare is the fact that you can use him. So use him. Doesn't do you a whole lot of good to have him out there on the offensive end if you're not going to get him some good looks to allow him to do his thing. because then you're not opening things up as much as you want. And his spot-up game hasn't been super strong yet this year. So make that adjustment, and I think we'll be good. But in the meantime, I think Dallas, I think he should have a good game tonight, KP. He's playing his old team. I think he should have a good game of the year. Sorry, I was reading someone's comment, and so I just realized I ran on there with two different thought processes. But I think he should have a good game tonight playing against his former team. I think he'll have a bounce back in that regard, and that's good. That's what we need from him, and I think it'll do a lot to kind of help him settle in as well. As for, I saw someone earlier talking about wanting to see more Boban. Yeah, I want to see more of him as well. I was surprised we didn't get really anything from him, anything of him, I should say, in the Magic game. I want to see more of him. I know we'll see more of him against Memphis. I think this would be, yes, a good time to roll him out as well, because the large lineup with KP and Boban has been very good for the Mavericks thus far, even though it hasn't gotten a ton of play because Boban hasn't gotten a ton of play. So it is what it is, but I want to see more of that, and I want to see more of everything. The best guy plus minus right now on the team with Luka, like paired with Luka on the floor, is surprisingly Tim Hardaway Jr. He is a plus 22.1 with Luka. So anyone outside of Boban, based on minutes, I say Tim Hardaway Jr., but Boban actually has the highest plus minus with Luka on the floor. That's pretty much what you're looking at. I've been a little harsh on Tim Hardaway Jr. I'll acknowledge I've been a bit harsh. I still think he can be good for us off the bench, but I think he's very hit or miss. And as such, I have entertained some ideas for potentially dealing him if it means getting a better fit for us in here. That was the post earlier talking about the possibility of bringing in Gallinari from OKC. Gallinari's 31 years old, would fit nicely in the offense, however, because as I posted his stat line, it's crazy. He's averaging basically 19 points. His rebound numbers aren't super high. He's averaging about 4 or 5 boards, but he's shooting like 46% from 3 on like 7 attempts per game. His effective field goal percentage is over 58%. I think his general field goal percentage is like 46%. I mean, he's playing really, really good for OKC. Now, he is 31 years old in an expiring contract, but he is another guy at 6'10" who can help you stretch the floor. And I think to get him, now you could talk about a couple different options there. You can talk about a couple different options for sure, because you do have a couple trade exceptions. You have the Harrison Barnes trade exception of, I think, about $22 million. And then you have another trade exception as well that all told give you a lot to work with here. I got the exact numbers here. Let me find it. I know I screen capped it the other day when I saw it because I knew it would be something worth bringing up. But you have a couple sizable trade exceptions that could change the look a little bit for the Mavericks. And son of a bitch. All right. Well, I'm not finding it now, so maybe I don't have it at this point. But the idea is pretty simply that you want to give yourself as much flexibility as you can. But if you do have to make a deal in that regard, you're going to have to give OKC something that they want. Right, you can't just be like, oh, ship them Tim Hardaway Jr. and Courtney Lee and call it a day. They're not going to do that. OKC wants draft picks and they want young prospects. So, as much as I love him, I immediately put Justin Jackson into the picture. Now, some people say put in Jalen Brunson instead. I love Jalen, and I love Justin Jackson. You're going to have to part with one of them. You can make the case for either in terms of who OKC would be interested in that regard. But then to make the salaries work, I threw in Tim Hardaway Jr. because OKC has reportedly said in the past they would be willing to take on Tim Hardaway Jr. They like what he could possibly bring to the team right now. And hey, it would keep consistent with his career of largely playing with bad teams. So Tim Hardaway Jr. and either Brunson or Jackson. Hurts my heart to say that for Jackson. Isaiah Roby's such a raw prospect, I don't think they would want him. They have a lot of guys like that already. And so at this point, it makes sense for them to say, like, if they want a draft pick, throw in a second rounder, because you can't throw in another first rounder until the first half of that Knicks deal is done. You got to at least get one of those first round picks taken by the Knicks before you can then deal another one. So I threw that in as well. A second round pick. Hardaway Jr. and either Jackson or Brunson. I would hate losing either of those guys, but it would give you a very big lineup. Gallinari is actually an underrated defender, I think. Can guard the 3 and 4 very well. Not a guy that's going to get you rebounds. That's a weakness. But it's an intriguing addition for sure when you look at what his production's been throughout his career. Health will be a question for him, and yes, he would be a free agent after this year, but hey, you'd have his bird rights, so you could make something happen with that and pay him more if you wanted to make sure you held on to him, or you would just have that much more cap space freed up in the offseason if you did let him go. Let's see here. So that's my thought. Gallinari is an interesting prospect to me in terms of what you could get. No, it's not a big dominant center or anything like that. I know some people are talking about Steven Adams. I just don't think that front court foot speed lineup works great with him and KP. Seems too slow and lumbering in that regard. And Adams is having a rough start to the season, so he's already been injured. So we'll see what that possibility looks like. But he is much younger at 25, and big contract though. I know what I'm talking about. Says OKC will take Jackson over Brunson. OKC are bad shooters, I'm gonna say. Yeah, probably. I think that's why I initially listed Jackson. Brunson would only be of intrigue to them, I think, because I do think they are going to move on from Chris Paul. I think they're going to trade him in the season as well. And as a result of that, the point guard is going to have a void. And I think that would work well for Brunson because he would be able to step right into a role. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for them looks like he could be a real stud. So that's good for them. And he's kind of a little bit of a combo guard, but I think they would like to have a Brunson with him in that regard. Because, as you said, yeah, they don't have a lot of good wings, so they would like a Jackson. They got a lot of good, long, athletic wings. They don't have shooters, so that could work for Jackson. And I think that's maybe what kind of sets it apart for them to get Jackson or prefer Jackson. I also kind of question, in the case of Jackson, they'll have him under contract for a couple more years, but you got to see if it's something that they want fit-wise for him, because I'm afraid to some extent. Shout out to the 71 of you in house, by the way. I'm a little bit afraid that Jackson's not getting the opportunity he should get in Dallas right now. I'm hoping that Rick's going to utilize him more. I know Dodo has been rebounding out of his mind and defending out of his mind lately, and that's great. He's definitely helping the team, but his offensive production just isn't really where you need it. Whereas Jackson, I feel like coming off the bench for them, has been good whenever he's actually gotten opportunity. Before JJ Barea took off in that Magic game the other night and got his 11 straight points, it was definitely Justin Jackson who got the team going in the first quarter and kept Dallas in it. I think he had 9 points in the first quarter, and he just didn't get a whole lot of minutes. So it is what it is. Let me take some of the comments here. Will the matchup be in New York? Asks Aram. No, it is here in the AAC for this game. Yeah, it's in Dallas for this game, and then they'll go to New York shortly thereafter. I think we play the Knicks again very soon, actually. Let me take a look at the schedule here. Yeah, November 14th. Thursday, November 14th is when they go to Madison Square Garden. But in the meantime, they got the Knicks tonight in Dallas. Then they go to Memphis, to Boston, to the Knicks. Back home for Toronto, Saturday, November 16th. That's the game that I should be at as a credentialed media member. Then they host the Spurs, Warriors, Cavs. So they got a chance to do something a little bit here. There's still some tough games in there, but there's also a lot of games where Dallas can very well win. Let's see here. There's quite a bit of criticism for Carlisle changing the starters too much. It somehow seems to work for this team, though, says Tolstoy. Yeah, Carlisle has changed out the lineup a lot. I think it's tinkering with things, seeing what works, and getting guys kind of accustomed to playing with each other, just different combinations, building that chemistry and continuity. And I feel that's a good thing. I understand some of the frustration for fans. I'm frustrated because we still haven't gotten Jackson to start any, but at the same time, I do think in the long run, it's better to get that kind of versatility and change things up like that. KP and Hardaway were teammates for longer than the rest of the team. Yes, they were. I think we only have 12 million of a trade exception left because of the DeLon trade. There was no. I don't think that's right because there was nothing in the trade exception for DeLon. We traded them 2 second rounders, but here's the thing I have for the trade exception. So the 12 million is on the Barnes trade. You're right about that part. Here's Brad Townsend on Twitter. They have 11.8 million left in the Barnes trade exception. It expires, February 7th, the 1-year anniversary of the trade. They also have a $1.2 million trade exception, expires the 31st. So you're correct. I was overblowing it earlier. Basically 12.5 to $13 million in trade exceptions that they have available. So that is an option, but I don't think that woos OKC as much. They're going to want draft picks, which they're hoarding, and they're going to want a young prospect, which Brunson or Jackson would do for them. And because Gallinari is an 31-year-old expiring contract, there's no way they're going to hang on to him. They're absolutely going to move him. And if you look at his numbers throughout his career, he's pretty solid. Pretty solid. Is Kevin Love out of the question? I don't think he's out of the question. I just don't. It's not the top of my list for what I want. We're not talking about Minnesota Kevin Love anymore. Cleveland Kevin Love's a different guy. He still showed in that game against Dallas. He can still be pretty effective, but I just don't love it because of his age, and I don't think he's as physical as he used to be. So I'm a little iffy on that, but it's not out of the question. Let's see. I'm nervous for tonight's game. The Knicks fans have been hating ever since KP got traded. Their coach probably told them that they have to beat us. Well, they're 1-7, so if you lose to them in a game that you should also be up and amped for because it's your, one of your cornerstone players' former team and it's his first time playing them, that doesn't look good for you if that's what you're doing, if you're not going to get up for that game. So that would be a huge blow to the Mavericks in terms of their pride. And it would make their home record pretty lousy right now. So they would have beaten, if they lose tonight, let's humor that and just say they do. They would have lost. They would have beaten Washington at home, and they would have beaten the Magic at home. They would have lost to the Lakers, lost to Portland, and lost to the Knicks. So they'd be 2-3 at home, and they're still currently unbeaten on the road, which is nice. But you got to defend home court better than that. Now, in the past few years, the road has been abysmal for Dallas, and it's been the home court where they've actually held serve for the most part. But you can't just completely flip it. You have to find a balance, and so you gotta win these games at home if you want to be a playoff team, especially against a team like the Knicks. When is the game starting? At 7:30 Central Time. Let's see. Rock says, DDP, the year only started with plus streak of win over loss, and people talk of trades or new pieces. Even the Carlisle had not relay used the whole options the team has at his disposal. So he's basically saying the year's only started, doesn't necessarily like that there's all the talk of trades and different pieces. I'm not really hounding on the trades thing. I threw out the Gallinari one just as a point of interest, just because now at this point we've seen a little bit of what the team looks like and we kind of have a feel of kind of who they are after the first couple of weeks. You're correct that Carlisle has not used all the tools in his toolbox yet, but we have seen a glimpse of everybody not named Isaiah Roby so far, and we can address certain weaknesses. We can address that even though the bench is really good, they don't really have a per se third guy. You're just hoping that the bench as a collective does it, or that one guy off of that bench steps up that particular night. So I pitched the idea on if you're not going to use Jackson like he can be used and should be used, I think. If you're not going to do that, then maybe move him and a bloated expiring contract to take one guy off that bench and, strengthen your starting lineup with something like Gallinari. That's just a thought. But I agree. Nothing's happening right now. I'm not calling for the Mavericks to make the trade right this minute. I'm just saying that's something to look forward to as we get closer to the deadline in February. Let's see. Did you hear about James Wiseman? I don't know all the details about it, but it's something related, looks like, to the NCAA. So based on that, not super dialed in on it. No, Mavs need someone to fight a big, strong center. Yeah, Powell got destroyed by Vucevic, and the long list for Powell in terms of physical centers he can't really guard is getting longer by the day, it seems like. Dwight Powell is one of those guys. I don't doubt his value to the team, but I think we leave him in compromised positions sometimes. Maxey should have gone more at Vucevic in that Orlando game, I felt. I think he's better able to handle the physicality of playing against Vucevic and not get backed down in the paint and beaten as badly. But it is what it is. We just got to see what they can find. What do you think about Marc Gasol? I think we need some championship experience to give us calm in the big minutes. He's perfect for that. I'd be interested in the possibility of adding him if we're talking about guys from the Raptors for whatever reason. I'd also be interested in Serge Ibaka. Serge Ibaka is another guy with a lot of experience, rim protector, rebounder. I think he could bring a lot to this team as well, and that's another guy that I watched for years with Oklahoma City and would be interested in. Now, to your point, for a center, Marc Gasol is obviously what you want, but I'm just talking general front court in that regard. I say stay the course right now. I like the personnel and would rather see them build more chemistry. Plus, Jackson reminds me so much of Sean Marion. I've been calling him Matrix Reloaded. Well, like the Matrix Reloaded, he wasn't very good. Certainly not as good as the original Matrix, but I get what you're saying. And obviously, he'll get that opportunity because, like I said, Dallas isn't making a trade anytime soon. If it happens, it's going to be closer to the deadline. So he'll have plenty of opportunity to make himself indispensable to the team and to find his rhythm if that's the case. Let's see here. I've been going for 41 minutes. I'm probably about to wrap up this stream here. But let's see. I'll take 3 more questions. Donald Praying. Any way we could trade for Gordon Hayward? I said Haywood, thinking of Brendan Haywood, former Maverick. Yeah, Hayward. He's got a really big contract, but he is off to a good start this year. So we gotta see what he looks like as the season wears on. It's still very early. He wasn't good last year, but I know that was his first year back from that horrific broken leg. So I'm curious, but at the same time, I think our issues are more so related to the front court than necessarily the shooting guard or a guy like Haywood. I know he plays some small forward as well, but I don't know. It's not at the top of my list, but it is a name that I could be talked into being interested in. Why do all the trades have to be white? Asks Anthony Lusk. Well, as I told you earlier on Facebook, they don't have to be. I listed off Serge Ibaka earlier. As I said on Facebook, if he was available, I'd be very interested in Jonathan Isaac. So it's not like that's the only thing we're looking at. You got to look at what the market is and what's available. So the examples that you're reacting to are Gasol and Gallinari. I don't know what to tell you, man. Those are 2 names that are out there and mentioned in trade deals. So those are the ones we mentioned. But it's not like we're trying to flip something with the team. Like you're making it into something it's not. So that's all I'm going to say on that subject for the 3rd time. Let's see here. That's why I don't get Orlando never played with that much intensity, but they gave 100% to try and beat us. I think the Knicks will give full effort in this specific game. I don't doubt that the Knicks are going to come out and they're going to try and do everything in their power. But when you get more firepower, and Orlando's not a bad team, by the way. When you're going with everything in your disposal, if you have the better team, you tend to ride it out and get to where you need, right? Like, eventually you separate yourself. We saw that with the Cavs game. That game was close for a while, and then Dallas pulled away by a big margin towards the end of the 3rd quarter, and then, of course, the 4th quarter. That's largely what you're going to see, I think. If Dallas, Knicks are going to hang around for a while, I imagine, but at some point Dallas should separate, and they're a much better team, obviously, 5-2 compared to 1-7. I already read off the blowout scores and blowout losses that they've had on the year. If Dallas can actually play up to its ability and rebound from a sloppy game, this past game, then I think Dallas will pull away and you'll see something like a 14-point win. But That's all it's really about in the focus here in this case. So, let's see. Trying to see if there's any other questions I want to take. No, I think that's probably going to wrap up this stream. A little bit of an awkward dismount, but whatever. I will post a video after the game, a summary of the game, a probably 15-minute breakdown, 15 to 20-minute breakdown as I usually do. Until then, guys, that's going to do it for my time. Thank you for everyone who tuned in to watch. Appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, remember, every legend was once a prospect. Salute.
High five.
I'm going to say KP goes for 27 points, 12 boards, 3 blocks. Peace.